Masta Ace, recording artist, born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. Been in the hip hop industry since 1988. My first album came out in 1990, and I've been releasing records since then. What's up, Ron?
How you doing, brother?
I'm good.
Excellent, man. I'm really psyched to talk to you, and I'm glad you took time out to chat, man. Do you still live in Brooklyn?
Now, I moved from Brooklyn to New Jersey in 2006.
Okay, very cool, very cool. You know, we actually met each other years ago, man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you the story. I wanted to open with this because it's gonna take you back, and then we could hit talking about the single. But I went to college on the West Coast at Stanford, and I used to have a radio show on KZSU Stanford, and the biggest DJ on our station, you know, was Kevy Kev.
I've been up there many times at that station.
Many times, right? So this one time, you were out there, I think, for Gavin potentially, or around that time, and you and I were on an Atlantic Records cruise around San Francisco Bay, and I remember it like it was yesterday because I remember you and I went outside and we were on the outside of the boat, and I looked and you had on an Electronic Arts jacket. And I was like,
those are my people. Those are my people back then, man.
Right,
Madden people.
Right. That's what you told me. I think something about you in a Madden competition or
Yeah. There was a celebrity tournament. That probably was, I want to say that was probably 93. Right around 93. Yeah. And I had gotten in really good with the people at EA Sports to the point where they were actually sending me versions of games before they came out just to get my feedback on the game. I would actually get to play like Madden before it came out and see if I had any complaints or issues or tweaks that they could do or things that I noticed. And so that's the reason I had that jacket on was because they used to lace me with t-shirts, jackets, hats, or EA Sports gear, and I was just proud to represent for that company because, you know, they looked out for me.
So how did that even? I mean, because at that time everybody was playing Madden. You know what I mean? Like that was it. Like, so how did you elevate your Madden game and awareness to the company to even get in that position? I'm just curious. That sounds amazing.
So I believe the way it happened was we had set up I had a league with my friends, guys I went to high school with, came up with, and we had our own Madden league. And so I just so happened to be really close with Jonathan Schechter, who was one of the editors of the Source magazine. And he and I had the Philadelphia Eagles fandom in common. And so we would hang out and talk about NFL and that kind of stuff. And so I told him about my league, and I showed him like our schedule, how everything was just really, really detailed, and he was impressed by that. He's like, man, we should do something like that for a celebrity kind of tournament, and just invite a bunch of rappers, because I don't think people realize that you play Madden like this. So the Source magazine set up the first really hip hop celebrity Madden tournament, which was actually, I believe it was broadcast on television, well, pre-taped and broadcast on BT, I believe. And so the people at EA Sports got cool with the Source, and that's how I met my guy Glenn Chen, who now works at Nike, I believe. But Glenn Chen was kind of like the liaison between the company and the hip hop community and the Source magazine. So I got cool with Glenn, and once me and Glenn got cool, that was it.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. That was a really, really cool time. I remember on that boat, if you recall, Supernatural was on there. And
I don't remember anybody who was on that boat. You have to tell me.
Yeah, it was wild. Supernatural was on there, and the following year at New Music Seminar was the infamous battle with Craig G.
Okay.
So it was just wild to be on there at the same time with you and everything. So let's talk about this project, man. So I've heard about Analog Players Society a little bit just locally, and they're made up of session musicians and things like that. How did you hook up with them?
I got an email one day, or either an email or I was hit up. I think I was hit up on social media initially, and then ultimately an email. This guy Ben Rubin saying that he had this project, this jazz project. He was looking for a vocalist to lay some lyrics down for a track, and he kind of like somewhat explained what Analog Player Society was and how they had done a bunch of sessions with these jazz musicians, and then now they were taking bits and pieces of those sessions and kind of creating tracks and then trying to get people to rap over it. He cited
Wow.
De La Soul. He cited De La Soul as the inspiration for this sort of technique for producing records, where you just get a bunch of jam sessions, record everything, and then kind of sample bits and pieces from the jam session to create new pieces of music. And so I love the idea. He sent me somewhere around 4 different pieces of music. I chose one that they were all dope, but I tried to choose something that lent itself to rap lyrics. And it was about the drums, and most of the stuff was really slow and laid back and cool. But this particular track, which I believe was at the time entitled Starry Nights, that was the one that I wound up choosing, and I wrote a song to it. I sent it to him. He's like, this is cool. It was a relationship song.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, this is really a cool song that you wrote, but I was really looking for something a little bit more, more specific to the times that we're living in now. And but I want it to be something that my children, they're very young, can also listen to, which I think was his way of trying to say, like, don't get too crazy with the language, or too crazy with the details, or how, just don't get too harsh with what I was talking about. So
Mm-hmm.
I was like, normally I don't go back and do records. When you don't give me any direction in the beginning, I write what I'm inspired to write. But
Right.
he asked me to try to go back at it again, and I looked at it through a new lens with his information. He actually cited a song from my most recent album with Marco Polo, a song called American Me. He said something in that lane, and once he said that, I kind of knew what he was looking for. And so I went back and rewrote the song, and the result was this song that we eventually called Home in America.
So now on their website, they said, we have a quote from you that said that you wanted to voice some of the angst from the last year,
Yeah.
but you didn't. You during COVID, you really didn't want to write an album, but this was one of the first times when you felt like you could actually express, some of that angst. Can you tell me a little bit about like where you were when the lockdown happened and how COVID time has been for you personally?
Yeah, I had just gotten back from Europe. I had just done a European tour, which started like the second week of January, and it went all the way through second week of February. And I had just gotten back home. I was only home for a month, maybe, working on my musical. We had just had a table read for my musical script. And literally the day we had the table read, they were saying on the news that New York City was pretty much about to be locked down, like within days. And there was even some question about whether we should even do the table read at that time. Was it too risky? There was just a lot of fear swirling around. And I typically take the train into the city because it's easier to deal with parking. And so I'm on New Jersey Transit. I'm walking through crowded Penn Station with thousands of people in rush hour to go to this table read. And, we were in a small room with about 15 or 20 people. But this is before mask mandates or any of that. And, it worked out, but that was what was happening at the time that the lockdown happened. I had just come back off tour. I was on to this next project, and all of this stuff kind of happened and put everything into really limbo, and a lot of uncertainty.
Mm. So you're in New Jersey, so you didn't have the, I guess, the sort of weirdness of, you know, going out of your door and there being a ton of people around and stuff like that. Like, did you get cabin fever, or did you feel okay sort of being at home?
Well, I don't know if I you know got cabin fever per se, but I knew that I was happy I wasn't living in the city anymore. Because a friend of mine works in the city, and he had told me shortly after that, he had told me how driving into the city for work, he went through the Lincoln Tunnel, and he was
Right.
like the only car. He was the only car in the Lincoln Tunnel, and this was during rush hour. I said, I can't imagine how scary that must be. If you're a New Yorker and you know what the Lincoln Tunnel looks like in rush hour, to be going through the tunnel and there's no other cars, that is just an uneasiness. So it made me realize that I was certainly better off where I was. There was a lot of weird stuff going on. And those first, I would say 2 to 3 months, I was a little bit uptight, a little bit uncertain about going outside. My wife and I, when we had to do grocery shopping, we were going at 6 in the morning, like literally setting the alarm for 5:30, waking up, going to the grocery store at 6 when they open, wearing rubber gloves, masks, coming home, wiping everything down with hand sanitizer or Clorox wipes, wiping the car doors, the handles, the
Right,
knobs,
right.
the refrigerator handles. Like, so that's how it started for me. But I would say by May, so those first couple of months we were a little tight, but then by May, because I was used to really doing a lot of. I would work out 3 days a week, and the gym was closed, everything was closed, and I felt myself starting to, you know, um, feel weaker because I wasn't working out, and so
Hmm.
I started doing some in home workouts. But then I said, I'm gonna get on my bike and just start riding around. And I took my mountain bike out and did a couple rides. We did it as a family a couple times. My wife, my daughter. And then she told me about she saw on Instagram there was a bicycle crew that was doing rides together, and I found out about them and started riding with them in late May or early June, and I've been riding with them for a year now. A bike crew called the Trendsetters Bike Crew. I've been riding with them since last May.
Oh, that's great, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a daughter too. We have a lot in common. Um, yeah, so that period, so I know another rapper in the neighborhood in Bed-Stuy. He's from DC. His name is Odyssey, and he's a pretty dope rapper. And we have daughters around the same age. And I actually would see him at the park a lot during COVID. And he told me that like he knocked out a whole album during that time. And so when I read that quote from you where it said basically that you just like it was just too much, like you you just felt too emotional to actually write any like album during that time. But did you feel like you got your emotions out in this particular track?
I got a lot of it out. Um, I was supposed to be working on the next album with Marco Polo last year. And I knew if I wrote the album, it was going to be all about what was happening. It was going to be
Mm.
about the election, the government, politics, the pandemic, the lockdown. It was gonna it was gonna come out too much in the music, and I didn't really want to
Mm.
do an album like that.
Got
Um,
it.
it was consuming me at that time, and I didn't want to do an album like that. So I focused on my musical, and I set the music to the side. And I said, next year, hopefully things I'll feel better about the world, about life, and then I can really start to work on honest music from an honest place. But in the meantime, I was doing feature work for a few people. Analog Players Society was one. I did another feature for Arrested Development,
Oh
and
wow.
I did a feature with an artist from the UK, a female MC named Tremendous. And those three songs, I was able to kind of speak to some of the social issues, political issues, police brutality, there was so many things that were kind of at the top of my consciousness that I was able to put into those verses and just kind of get it out of my system in that way. And I was able to do it on other people's records and not do it on mine.
I get it. I get it. Home in America, one of the hooks is, or I think part of the main hook is, I want to go home. Are you talking literal or figurative? I mean, you kind of explained in the last verse, but are you talking about Brooklyn, Africa, like a sense of well-being? Like, what are you talking about in terms of home?
Truly, I wanted the listener to ask that question, the question that you just asked. And I wanted the listener to decide for themselves what I meant, because it really could mean a few different things. It could mean literally Africa. It could mean America doesn't feel like home, so things need to change so that I can feel like I'm at home.
Yeah.
And so I just certain things that I write them to be thought provoking and to try to stimulate dialogue among listeners and among fans and among people. Because the conversation is what makes it interesting, because you could have four different people listen to that song and come up with four different interpretations of what that term "I want to go home" means. So it meant a few different things to me, and I just wanted to make it a topic of discussion for listeners.
That's great, man. So do you plan on doing more with them, or was it a one-off? Are you guys gonna do an EP, or they're gonna do like touring or any kind of show, the Blue Note or anything like that, you think, at some point?
I mean, all of those options would be cool. We haven't talked about those things yet. Certainly, what the song does and where it goes might determine it. I always thought that it was a one-off, and I thought that they were going to probably reach out to other artists, other hip hop artists, to do other songs. But I don't know if I don't know which way they're thinking, but I'm open to all things. The touring possibility as well.
That reminded me, I mean, it wasn't obviously the same kind of song, but it reminded me that you had done work with Young Disciples way back in the day. And I remember that because I was really into them as a DJ and going to Giant Step and all of that. And they were really big, you know, around that time and everything like that. So yeah, that was pretty cool. All right, cool. I mean, do you mind if we talk a little bit about, you know, the past at all?
Nah, whatever you want to talk about, bro.
That. So I want to know. So I live in Bed-Stuy now. I've been in Brooklyn for about 24 years. I'm from Washington D.C. Like I said, I went to school on the West Coast, but I'm just curious. Like Brownstone, even today, is kind of rough. Not Brownstone, Brownsville today is still kind of rough. What was it like growing up back then? I mean, you're growing up around the same time like Mike Tyson and like Captain MOP and stuff like that. I mean, I hear a lot of it in your music, but like, can you just, you know, bless me with like just some thoughts on like how it was then, and like, you know, what motivated you to get out? Because I saw you went to University of Rhode Island.
Yeah.
So you obviously wanted to get out.
Yeah. Well, even back then, Brownsville was considered a rough neighborhood. Probably because of the concentration of housing projects in such a small area. There's so many different housing projects. I want to say there's probably seven to 10 different housing projects within a 10-block radius. I mean, different groups of houses, different communities of people, and one housing project right across the street from the next, and all within walking distance from each other. But my memories as a young person about Brownsville was mostly positive, because I was young and life was just all about having fun, about playing games in the neighborhood. Yeah, we knew, you know, if you ventured into another part of a different area of housing projects, that if they didn't know you, there could be the potential to, you know, get robbed or get beat up or get something, you know, get your bike stolen or something like that. So we lived our lives on alert at all times. We were always aware of our surroundings. We were always on point and paying attention, because Brownsville was a place that if you let your guard down and you weren't paying attention to your surroundings, you could get got. So I
Yep.
always have grown up that way. I've lived my life that way. Even as an adult, I walk into a party and there's a lot of people and people are having a good time and celebrating, but I find myself looking around the room to try to figure out if there are any potential threats in the room. If there's a
Hmm.
potential argument happening across the room at the bar with two guys about a girl. Like I'm seeing this from 50 feet away. Oh, that guy tried to talk to that girl and that's his girlfriend. And now they're having a conversation. That could be a problem. And
Yep.
so I've just, Brownsville raised me that way to just always know what was happening around me and to be alert to my surroundings. And I suppose you're ready to fight if it's a problem. And sort of you avoided trouble by the way you carried yourself. People would look at you, figure out if you were a weak person that they could try. But if they looked at you and you looked like you were ready for it or wanted it or welcoming it, then they would go find somebody else. And so that's just the way I was. It's embedded in me. It's who I am.
Tell me how you like got into music in general. Like it sounds like from that song 1970 something, or you were digging in the crates and things like that. And but like how did was that really the entree you would say to getting into music? Did you
I
study
didn't really.
music in college?
No, not at all. I didn't study. I studied marketing in college. But I didn't know I was digging in the crates. I don't even know if that was we called it that yet. But I learned very quickly from the people that I was around in my neighborhood because we started off as DJs, just DJing and just playing records. And then I decided that we're gonna make these tapes, these instrumental tapes, to make them more interesting. Let's add some vocals to it. And I was the first one to step up to say, all right, I'm gonna spit some rhymes over these beats that we're cutting up. But when when um when the opportunity came, I was in college. I was a sophomore year college. I won a rap contest at the skating rink in Queens, New York, United States of America. And
Oh wow.
first prize was 6 hours of studio time with Marley Marl. And
Wow.
so those that first that summer, after my sophomore year in college, I finally got to Marley's crib in Queensbridge Projects to record my first demo. Um, and I believe it was really there that I found out and learned that the way you create hip hop records is you find samples. I don't remember who told me that or how that was communicated to me. I just know that I was like, oh, my mom got mad records. My mom's and my uncle together combined have mad records. And I went home and I just started listening to every record looking for something to rap over.
Right.
And I started to find sounds, samples, loops that I felt like could lend themselves to rap over. Now, in our DJ years prior to this, our early DJ years, we were always looking for breaks anyway,
Right.
because when you're cutting and scratching, you try to find the break on every record. So,
Right.
oh, this is a dope part to cut because the drums come in right here. So let's
Right.
cut that. So I kind of had the sense of that already, but now I understood that there was a machine that would take that sound and it could loop it and the whole thing. So I started coming to Marley's crib with bags of shopping bags full of records with ideas and things that I knew for a fact I wanted to rap over. And that was really the beginnings for me.
So can you? I'm curious. I'm always curious about this particular time in music because this '88 was when I was a senior in high school, and I remember distinctly that from like '86 to like I think one of the biggest game changers, at least for me, sonically, was the show, as well as Houdini. But that's a whole nother ball game. But can you talk about the like in your mind where you were like, okay, you know what? Like everybody's done James Brown to death. Like, did you act meaning like it just felt like everybody at that time, a lot of people were using a ton of James Brown.
Right.
Did you feel the tension to go away and find other sample types at that point that weren't James Brown, or were you
Not
just going not?
not yet. That didn't come until probably 93 when I was working on my second album, Slaughterhouse. But in 89, when we were looking for samples, nobody had sampled James Brown yet, believe it or not. For the most part, nobody had used it. Marley, I was actually at Marley's house the day he made the song "It's a Demo" for Cool G Rap and Polo, and he sampled James Brown for that. So he sampled "It's a Demo" for Cool G Rap and Polo in '86, and so I remember hearing that beat, and I remember not liking it because nobody was sampling yet. Everybody, it was all drum program beats. There was no samples yet. It sounded weird to me. It just didn't sound like what I was used to hearing. I was used to hearing a drum machine, kick snare, timbali, hi-hat, and then maybe a bass line that somebody played a live bass. That's what I was used to hearing. So this was like way different. I don't know what made him, sample that beat and make it repeat and all of that, but that was kind of the beginning for me. So the next probably 4 or 5 years, well, maybe less than that, because I remember Super Lover C Casanova Red sampled James Brown for "Do to James" around that same time period as this a demo was out. So that was when kind of the James Brown sample started getting crazy. By the time I got to, and you got to remember too, I was limited by the records that my mother and uncle had. So there wasn't a lot of James Brown in those collections. So I wasn't inspired by James Brown necessarily because there weren't a bunch of James Brown records at my disposal. My mom's had Earth, Wind and Fire, Ohio Players, Curtis Mayfield, those kind of records. So those are the records that I brought up to, Marley's crib, Ashford and Simpson, stuff like that. That's what she was into. So I was limited to what was in that collection at the house.
Yeah, my mom was really into Earth, Wind and Fire and Gil Scott-Heron, so I listened to those.
A lot of Gil Scott too. Yeah,
a lot
Gil
of
Scott.
Scott.
I used Gil Scott on my first album. The title track, "Take a Look Around," that music is directly from Gil Scott, and I basically took his poem for "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised," and I wrote my own poem over the same music and did "Take a Look Around."
That's awesome. I want to know a little bit about the competitive environment with the Juice Crew, right? So I get you met Marley, like what it didn't feel like the Juice Crew was like Wu-Tang, right? It wasn't like that, but
right.
Like, were you guys all friends before, or he just kind of pulled people together? And did you hang out? Like, did you like have freestyle battles? Like, how was the environment when you guys were around each other?
Well, I wasn't friends with anybody. I was kind of like one of the last people to get down. And my observation of the crew when I got in was that pretty much nobody hung out. The people that were from Queensbridge were cool, like Shan, Shantae, Craig, Shan, Shantae, Craig, Marley from Queensbridge. So they kind of worked together. Biz wasn't from there. Biz brought Kane in. So even though Biz was down with Shantae first, he tried to just kind of start his own thing. So he brought Kane in under his umbrella. And if dudes hung out, I never really saw a lot of hanging. I'm sure there were instances where they hung out. I know Kane and Biz hung somewhat. But for the most part, everybody was an individual entity and everybody was acquainted, maybe based on their upbringing. Like I got cool with Kane because we were the only two from Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. So I got cool with Kane, Mr. C, Scoob, and Scrap because we were the only ones on the label that were, from BK. Jizza came later. But there was never a competitive nature in my mind because we were never pitted against each other. Of course, you're listening to your label mates' songs, or that's a dope song. And I understood what the bar was because I was listening to Cool G Rap and Big Daddy Kane and Shan and Biz. And I understood that whatever I make has to be at least at that level, if not better. That was the bar. but I never felt like I was competing with anybody else on the label. I was just trying to do my own thing in my own lane and just make it as dope as what they were doing.
That's great. Now, I crowdsourced a couple of questions from my friends when I told them that we were going to talk. Because I'm a huge fan, by the way. I was playing all of those records on my radio show. I was playing them when I was DJing at parties. So yeah, I was super excited. But one question that came up that was pretty funny was, how long with me and Biz, rest in peace, Biz, by the way, really big loss. How long did you know, or did you realize while you were recording that Biz wasn't going to show up? And did you expect him to show up?
I didn't know. The whole reason that I was recording the song where I was imitating Biz's voice was because the plan was he was going to get the tape, listen to it, memorize his parts, and then come into the studio when he was ready and lay his verses down. It wasn't until after he heard the song, agreed to do the song, and I asked him to come record it at Marley's house. That's where we hit the bump in the road, because he and Marley weren't seeing eye to eye at the time. Oh. And he was like, I'll do the song, but I'm not recording at Marley's house. You're gonna have to come record it at my house. And so recording it at his house meant taking the 2-inch reel, the master, to Biz's house to record. And Marley refused to release those tapes to me, to take to Biz's house for him to record. So at that point, we were at an impasse. Marley made the decision, or convinced me, that the cool thing would be to just leave the vocals how they were and release it as me imitating Biz, which it wasn't something that I wanted to do or that I thought was dope. But being a brand new artist, not wanting to ruffle feathers or rock the boat, I went along with it, kind of reluctantly. And the result is what the result was.
Yeah, I mean, that song was fairly successful, though. Right? I mean,
it wasn't. It was in some circles.
Yeah.
The reason it was successful, to whatever degree that it was successful, is because Warner Brothers, the parent company, the distributor, forced me as an artist to put that out as the first single. I didn't want that to be the single at all. I didn't want that to be a single. I thought it was just a cool, lighthearted record that to kind of put on the album, because there was so much more serious topics and stuff I was rapping about. The tone of the album was very, very serious, very deep. I'm trying to uplift the community and all that kind of stuff. And they, of course, typical major label, they're gonna pick the most lighthearted song on the album and make that be the single. And so they forced my hand. Benny Medina straight up said, if you don't put this out as the first single, don't expect to get another single. And so my hand was forced as a brand new artist, with no legs to stand on. But then it put them in the position that they had to at least work it hard, because they understood that they had stuck their necks out and made me put this out as a single. So if the record had, it got to, I think it definitely made it to top 10 on the rap chart, on the Billboard rap chart. I don't know how high it made it on the top 100 chart, probably in the 40s, 30s, something like that. But if it was successful, it's because Warner Brothers didn't want to look like they were wrong.
Right. No, I get that totally. I remember that time like it was yesterday. I remember getting that record into the radio station for sure. And folks we talked about it in our music meeting. People were reluctant to play that particular track because, one, we're college radio, two, there were other bangers on the record, and so it didn't get a lot of run. One thing that I've always been intrigued with you about, just as a listener and as a DJ, is especially like digging in, like in preparation for this. I went back to the Delicious Vinyl stuff, right? And I thought like those, like for instance, I felt this tension lyrically and thematically in Slaughterhouse that I want to talk to you about, which is, I felt like in one hand, I felt like there was this undercurrent of sort of consternation towards West Coast hip hop, right? Like meaning like some of the negative imagery, some of the things they were talking about, some of the disrespect of women. But at the same time, I also felt like you were kind of embracing some of the West Coast kind of sounds and flavors, because those two records like hit pretty big, especially Born to Roll on the West Coast. Like can you talk a little bit about like the tension maybe you were feeling as an artist from the East, like coming to the West, and like all of those things that were going on in that record?
Well, it was never my intention to specifically target the West Coast. I was really just targeting gangster hip hop in general, because those same sort of themes and ideas and talking points existed on the East Coast as well. Everybody was trying to be gangster as hard as possible, guns and videos, 40s and blunts, the imagery, everything that went along with it. I just when we did the video for Slaughterhouse, because we had MC Ignoro and the MC Negro and the Ignorant MC,
right?
Which were kind of like parody West Coast rappers with Jerry curl wigs. It was me really railing against the entire industry for the idea that hardcore meant, or hardcore hip hop meant, these things. It meant talking about 40s, blunts, disrespecting women, guns, violence. That's what hardcore was. And I came from a school where it was about the beats and the bars and how dope the rhymes were, and it wasn't about these topics. And there was just a point where I felt frustrated that an artist like myself, who had graduated from college and could still deliver what I thought was a hard record, wasn't going to get a fair shake because I wasn't talking about these things. So I did the most anti-gangster album that I could do, and the result of that was the Slaughterhouse album.
Tell me about like how you got into the car culture, and have you evolved out of it, or are you still down with like those cats?
I've definitely evolved out of it, but in my 20s, my first vehicle that I bought with my money was a Chevy Blazer, and it was an '84 Chevy Blazer. I bought it used. I put rims on it, and I had a close friend who I went to high school with, a high school teammate of mine, who was doing sound systems, and he built me a speaker box in the back of my Chevy Blazer. And I had two 15s and two 12s in it. It was super loud, and I drove around Brooklyn with this sound system shaking. The rear view mirror would shake. You couldn't even see cars behind you. That's how bad the rear view mirror was shaking. But that, he was a car enthusiast. He was, he tinted windows. He did sound systems. I was around a lot of that stuff, and then I took a trip, my first trip to Cali, to LA, and that was that was probably 91 or 92. It was before my Slaughterhouse album, and I got to hang out in LA on the I got to see the cruising that happened on Slauson Boulevard on Sundays, and then there was another cruising. There was another cruising thing that happened by the beach.
I know them both well.
Yeah, and so
one is in Venice, possibly.
Yeah, Venice Beach. Yep, Venice Beach, and it was my first time seeing California cars. I'd never seen lowriders. I'd never seen Daytons. All of that was like brand new to me. And so when I got back home, I was like, wow, like there's a whole nother world out there of cars and styles of cars and ways to hook cars up. And I was already subscribing to a bunch of different car mags because I was trying to come up with, other things to do to my Chevy Blazer. So I subscribed to I started subscribing to Lowrider magazine, a few other magazines. And man, my living room was piled up with these different car magazines. Trucking magazine. I remember Lowrider, Trucking. There was like three others. And they were all, about chroming out cars, engines, just different customizations. And so I just became an enthusiast, and I decided to write the song "Cheap Ass Nigga," which was inspired partially by those experiences and partially by LL Cool J's "Booming System" song, because I was actually with Marley in the studio when he mixed "Booming System,"
Oh,
and
wow.
it so those were the two influences.
Around this time though, like there was, I think you dubbed it Brooklyn bass music. Like, were you
Yeah.
actually listening to like Luke and DJ Magic Mike and those cats from Miami, or you just wanted to create something that was like just super heavy bass and just call it like
Yeah.
Brooklyn bass?
It was for me, it was just about the 808s and the 909s and how deep the bass on the songs could go. I wasn't trying to do that sound. You know, to me the Luke sound was basically Planet Rock,
Yeah,
uh Soul Sonic Force Planet Rock over and over and over again, just flip different ways. That
right.
tempo, that sound.
Which was
I was trying
Kraftwerk.
to do right. I was trying to do slower stuff. I was trying to do more East Coast laden, slow, but very, very bassy, deep joints that would sound really, really good in the car, in the truck, in the sounds with the sound systems. And so that's why I call it Brooklyn bass music. And I was just trying to create something new, trying to find a way to I was trying to find a way to relate to markets outside of New York, by calling it that and hoping that people in the Midwest and the South and Southeast, Southwest would potentially, embrace.
My last question on Sitting on Chrome, which was something I noticed that was really kind of interesting in the IMC ride. There's a Ron Isley vocal sample, but the actual "For the Love of You" melody seems to have been played in the studio.
So I had heard through, conversations through the grapevine that, or what Dr. Dre would do is he would just kind of take the music and then get musicians to come in and replay the parts that he wanted to play. So I heard that that's what he did. So I tried to do something similar. I was really, always intrigued by Dre and what he did production wise. And I tried to mirror or parrot what he was doing, even though I knew I couldn't do it at that same level. I was trying to find, that same groove that Dre was doing. And so that was me experimenting with sounds and trying to do my best version of what I felt like Dr. Dre did.
And it worked. I mean, that was a pretty big hit at the time. Let's talk a little bit about Crookland Dodgers, because I thought that was a really cool uh, song that came together at a point where I really wanted to hear more Masta Ace. And like how did the whole Spike Lee thing? Did you go on set? Like, how was it working with Buckshot and and Special Ed? Like, in that situation.
Well, I just want to say first that the timing of Crooklyn was really perfect for me, to be asked to be on it, because I got a call from Q-Tip and he basically asked that I wanted to be on a song for Spike Lee's soundtrack, and I said absolutely. But the timing of it was just perfect because at that time, Born to Roll was really a huge record on the West Coast, in the South and Midwest, and New York was really not feeling me at that time. Um, they felt that I had kind of sold out the East Coast and had quote unquote went West Coast.
Mm.
Um, and the Crooklyn record was an opportunity for me to remind people where I was actually from and make it very, very clear and make that statement. By me being one of the three MCs on this song, it would make it clear that I was from Brooklyn. That's where I'm from. Yeah, I'm doing these other records that are working in other markets, but this is who I am. And so I'm really, really fortunate to get that timing happened the way that it did. Now, many people don't know this, but the original recording of Crooklyn isn't what you hear as the final record. We recorded vocals to that beat that were more typical rap vocals, braggadocio, just kind of going in, just trying to outdo each other lyrically or whatever. And when Spike heard that version, he said, this doesn't really speak to the movie.
Mm.
The movie wasn't out yet. And he set up a private screening for us and about 15 other people, in a very small room. And we watched the Crooklyn movie. And he explained that, now you guys have seen the movie. It takes place in the 70s. You know, you need to lay down lyrics that speak to the 70s and speak to what you just saw on screen. And we went back and rewrote our lyrics, and that's the song that people know as Crookland.
A lot of your albums feel like mini movies. You know, particularly I thought Long Hot Summer and Disposable Arts were really super cinematic. And I'm curious if you've ever thought about doing movies or screenplays or anything like that, because you tell an incredible story.
Yeah, I've thought very, very seriously about it. I want to crawl before I walk, so I'm trying to take baby steps. I'm gonna try my hand first at this hip hop musical that I'm writing. I'm doing it in conjunction with a hip hop theater company called Rhymes Over Beats, and I've
Oh,
been
wow.
working on that for about 3 years now. Um, before we got on this call, I was actually working on the script. But once I get the script to a certain point, then we'll go to the next phase. But um, I've also written a pilot for a TV show, an episode of a TV show. I actually have 3 episodes for this show, but those are kind of the baby steps for me to see if I could write a feature film or a screenplay. Um, I got to get my feet wet first in the script writing space, and so that's what I've been doing for really the last 3 years or so. Just kind of getting my feet wet, and we'll reach that point. There's a few story ideas of friends and family members that are compelling to me. I just got to first get my groove, get my script writing groove, um, and then hopefully I can reach the point like Tyler Perry where he's cranking out 25 scripts a month or something, whatever he's doing over there. I don't know how you crank out that many scripts, because for me it's more quality over quantity, and that's always been my mentality. Instead of dropping 5 albums, let's drop one really really dope album instead of 5 okay albums.
So you've collaborated with a ton of great MCs over the years. Like, is there anybody that you wish that you had collaborated with, dead or alive, or that you could, like top 3 that you would love to have collaborated with?
Well, I wanted me and MF Doom to do another record. I actually had a record slated for this new album with Marco Polo. I had already laid a verse down and I sent him the song. And he was down to do it, but obviously he fell sick and passed away. But he was somebody that I wanted to do another record with. And as far as other people, the thing about me and features is weird. Anybody who you've heard on any of my albums that I featured with, I didn't go into the project saying, "Oh, I'm gonna do a song. I'm gonna do a song with Rapper Noah, or I want to do a song with Lil Fame, or I want to do a song with Pharoah Monch." What I typically have done is created the song first, then listened to the song and said, "Who fits this song? Who's the perfect artist to tackle this task, this topic, this theme?" And then picked my features that way. I've never gone out and said, like Marco Polo, my brother, he says to me stuff like, "Yo, on this next album, we need to get such and such." And I'm like, how can we say need to get such and such if we don't have the song yet? Like, I
Right.
don't believe in picking features before the fact. So I guess I don't have, you know, necessarily dream artists that I wanted to, do records with. It really just has to fit the record, it has to make sense. If it makes sense, then I'm down. I'm totally down with it.
I love it. Okay, so this is actually the last question. So throughout your career, especially I think sort of around the Slaughterhouse and post Slaughterhouse era, it's obvious that you were having some challenges with the music business, and the "F all y'all" song puts that in perfect context and puts it really well. What advice would you have for these up and coming artists now, as they sort of navigate the music business, given everything that you've gone through?
I'm really worried for them, because the landscape is way different than when I came up. It's not just about talent. It's not just about ability. It's about a lot more than that. There's a lot more that goes into it, and not every artist is um, prepared for this industry. They think they are. They think they think their little song that they just made at their man's house is this is gonna be the hot new joint. But until they get it into perspective and realize that for every you, there's 5,000 more in every city doing the same thing with the same little song. And most of them are out trying to seek success off one record, as opposed to trying to build a career, trying to make a project, an album. None of them, almost none of them, have the vision of career, have the vision of album or consistency. They literally are all out trying to get lucky off one record. It's like they're all playing the lottery, putting their $5 down, buying these lottery tickets, and hoping that they're going to hit. And the odds of one of them making it is about the same odds as the lottery.
Man, and with that, brother, I think that's incredible advice. It's been great talking to you, man. Really great.
I appreciate it.
Got a chance. You're a bona fide legend, living legend, and I'm just super excited that we got to talk. I had a ton more questions, but we got a good hour, and so I think that's all I can ask.
That's cool. I appreciate it, Ron.